life and crimes of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Early life of Richard Ramirez. Richard Leyva Munoz. Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children. Raised in a family that was often troubled, Richard's childhood was marked by hardship and trauma. His father, Julian Ramirez, was a strict and sometimes violent man who worked as a policeman. Richard's mother, Mercedes, was a deeply religious woman who believed in traditional values and practices. However, Richard's early life was anything but typical for a child in a relatively poor Mexican-American household. From a very young age, Richard experienced both physical and emotional abuse. His father had a temper that would often result in him lashing out at his children. Richard was subjected to beatings, and his home life was chaotic. His father's physical violence left Richard with an overwhelming sense of fear, while his mother's strict religious upbringing imposed a sense of guilt and shame. Richard's relationship with his parents was strained at best, with little affection shared between them. Another formative event that would shape Richard's dark path occurred in 1967 when he was just 7 years old. Richard suffered a head injury after he was knocked unconscious by a car door. The injury left him with a permanent scar and may have contributed to his later violent behavior, although this is debated. This head injury became one of the many potential contributing factors to Richard's mental and emotional deterioration. As he grew older, his behavior became more erratic, and he struggled with feelings of inadequacy and anger. During his early teenage years, Richard's path was influenced by his older cousin, Miguel. Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran, was a brutal and dangerous man who introduced Richard to violent and gruesome images from the war. He would show Richard photographs of mutilated bodies and tell him about the horrors he had witnessed on the battlefield. It was through these discussions that Richard began to develop a deep fascination with violence, death, and suffering. While Miguel would often talk about committing violent acts and even describe his own experiences with murder, Richard's fascination with crime and violence began to grow. He was also exposed to drug use and began experimenting with marijuana, LSD, and other substances in his early teens. This experimentation led to a dangerous pattern of behavior. Richard started using drugs regularly, and his mental state deteriorated rapidly. His school performance suffered, and he became known as a disruptive and troubled child. As a teenager, Richard dropped out of high school and moved to California in search of something more. He stayed with his older sister, where he continued to indulge in drugs and started stealing.